Okay, I'm going to get started this morning by just welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see all of you guys here. Welcome to anyone who's joining us online as well. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we learn with the original words of the Buddha. I'll explain to you guys what this is when we get started. We start with a meditation to help you guys understand meditation and actually practice meditation. So we'll do that first, then I'll explain to you guys what the Pali Canon and English study group is. If you'd like to join for meditation, we're going to be doing breathing mindfulness meditation. This is one of the primary types of meditations that the Buddha taught in order to train the mind to get to enlightenment, where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll no longer experience any discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these feelings and others are eliminated from the mind. And this comes through training of the mind. Meditation is part of that, but there's other things you need to learn as well besides just meditation. So if you'd like to join for meditation, I start with some chanting to ease us down into the meditation. And if you'd like to chant along, they're on a laminated sheet over there on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself to one of the chanting sheets over there. You'll see the Pali words that I'll be chanting, and you guys can chant along. And then you'll see the English translations as well. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory, because everything that he taught was oral. So every 2 weeks they would come together and they would recite his teachings word for word as a way to help them remember the actual teachings. So when you're chanting, this isn't a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship. It's not prayer or anything like that. So it's important not to think of it in that way, because the origins of chanting is that it helped people to remember the teachings, because everything they taught was oral during that time frame. The technology to write things down didn't exist in that region of the world. So they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory. If you read the actual English translations, you're going to see a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of that, I don't think the Buddha actually created these chants himself, because someone who's gotten to enlightenment, among other things, they've eliminated their ego. They don't have arrogance and pride. They're not putting themselves above people or below people. So there's not like this pecking order in their mind. If you read these English translations, there's a lot of respect for the Buddha in there. So he wouldn't have walked around and saying, hey, chant these things to me out of respect to me. So probably his students created these either during his life or after his death. Because if you learn from a teacher how to move from the anger and the sadness and frustration and all those other discontent feelings to this enlightened mental state where your mind's permanently peaceful and joyful among other qualities, and this person didn't want anything from you or expect anything from you, you probably have a lot of respect and gratitude for that person too. So during the lifetime of the Buddha and now and long after his death, there were people who had a lot of respect and gratitude for the Buddha. And I suspect that's where these chants actually came from, is people who had experienced the benefits of his teachings and were interested in paying respect to him. They might have created these chants for that purpose. I use it in order to ease the mind in the meditation and actually get more benefit out of the meditation itself. So if you'd like to chant along, you're more than welcome to do that. After the chanting, you're going to hear me come in with some guidance, and I'm going to be guiding you in the meditation. It's basically like giving you instructions while we're actually meditating at the same time. So you'll be learning how to meditate and actually meditating all at the same time. But then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're just all meditating together. And of course, it's not going to be able to be permanently quiet. So you're probably going to hear an occasional car coming past. You might hear a bird chirping, a dog barking. This is all impermanence. You can't be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. So if your mind craves permanent quietness, then when you hear a sound, you'll be annoyed or you'll be frustrated or agitated. This is your own mind that's causing these feelings. But you can understand impermanence and that any sounds that you hear are impermanent, and you can't be in permanent quietness. It's not possible. So when we're meditating during that period of time where it's just quiet, you might hear occasional sounds. But then we're going to come out of that with some more chanting. And that's where I'll explain to you guys what the Pali Canon and English study group is, and we'll actually start that. In terms of your body positioning for meditation, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught: seated, lying, standing, and walking. And you would learn these different positions at different times. It's kind of like a tool belt that you assemble as you're making your way towards enlightenment. You're going to need these various tools at different times. But oftentimes people are learning in the seated position. So I'll teach you guys that position as an introduction to help you be able to meditate. Oftentimes people are either sitting on the floor in a chair. If you're at home, you might be on a sofa or a bench or a wheelchair or something like this. You can sit however you like. There's not just one way to actually sit. So you can find whatever's comfortable for you. So whatever I share with you here is just guidance to be able to help you to find something that might be a little bit more comfortable for you. If you're on the floor, you might have some cushions under your rear. This is going to kind of soften the seat for you and make it more comfortable for you to sit. And then if you cross your legs, you just like to bring them together lightly, where if you have your legs real tight, this will impede the circulation and it can cause pain in the lower body. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets the hips up in the air and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, allowing the circulation to flow. And then with your hands and arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. You need to find what's comfortable for you. So some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you can find whatever's comfortable for you. And this is the same for anybody who's in a chair or on a sofa or a bench or a wheelchair. You can also find whatever's comfortable for you. You might decide to put your feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles. And then again, with the hands and the arms, you can just put them wherever you're comfortable. With the upper body, it's helpful if this is erect. If you have the sternum up and the shoulders back, it'll help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be in the middle. It also helps you not only to keep your mind attentive and alert, but it helps you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So if you'd like to join along with the chanting, again, I'm going to start with that, and then I'll come back in with some guidance for you. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Hotang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahatu Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahatu Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahatu Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma สติสัตตาตาวะมนุสนังโหโตภาควาติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาโพตังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิ สวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตวาปานุสนังโอโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you. Welcome to everyone here at the temple. Welcome to everyone joining us online as well. As I mentioned, today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and I'll explain to you guys what that is here in a moment. But for those of you guys that it's your first time here at the temple, I'd like to share a few things with you just to help you feel even more comfortable. In the back of the room, the last two doors, there's bathrooms there. You're welcome to use those at any time. Just feel free to get up and use the restroom. If you go outside the classroom to the parking lot, you're going to see signs that take you around to the main temple bathrooms. You can even use those if you'd like. We've got refreshments and snacks and things like that over here that our students provide that you're welcome to help yourself to anything over there. So just make yourself comfortable as we go throughout the morning. So this Pali Canon English study group is part of the offerings that we have here to be able to help students to be able to get to enlightenment. Essentially what we've got is we've got a book series of 13 books that are the original words of the Buddha to be able to help guide you on the path to enlightenment and understanding how to move your mind to this mental state where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer experience any discontent feelings. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these feelings in others are eliminated from the mind. You won't even have the slightest displeasure in the mind. And this is accomplished through training of the mind. You're eradicating certain pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind, and you're applying the tools and techniques in order to be able to uproot those out of the mind and be able to get to this peace and this joy that is the enlightened mind. And because you've eliminated these pollutions, the mind's going to be performing optimally. You'll notice that there's focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. You'll notice your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming, where you won't have bitterness and harshness and hostility in your relationships any longer. You might think these feelings and this bitterness and harshness is coming from the other person, where in reality it's coming from your own mind, and you can actually transform that. You can eliminate it. You can get to the point where you don't even have a bad mood anymore by the time you get to enlightenment. Again, this comes through training of the mind. So the various programs that we have here, it's structured around this book series of 13 books, where this first book, it's titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is used in all of our foundational programs and classes and courses and retreats. It's part of our group learning program, where each Sunday and Wednesday I'm guiding students through this book, so that over a 7-month period, Sunday, you're going chapter by chapter, where you're receiving a talk on this book. And you can actually get this book for free by downloading it from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by just reimbursing us for our printing cost, or you can order it on Amazon if your country has access to Amazon. So that's where students usually start, is where with this first book and with all of our foundational programs. But then we have other programs like this one here, the Pali Canon and English Study Group, where we go through volumes 2 through 13. And this is a 1.5-year program where you're gradually being walked through understanding the original words of the Buddha. Today, we're actually in this volume 7, which is titled Breathing Mindfulness Meditation. This is a consolidated version of the Teachings of the Buddha on meditation, because the Teachings of the Buddha are in 45 volumes of books that are about this thick. That's what's called the Pali Canon, right? And if you actually read this, it'd probably take you several years to actually read it, digest it, understand it. So what this book series does is it consolidates it into 13 books, where you can get to the real heart of what the Buddha actually taught. So this particular book is about breathing mindfulness meditation. You'll find a consolidated collection of teachings of the Buddha on breathing mindfulness meditation. And the way that we do this program is very different than other programs that we do. Typically, I'm teaching, and maybe I'm teaching 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then I'm opening up to questions, teaching another 15, 20, 30 minutes, opening up to questions. But in this program, what I do is I share these chapters of the teachings of the Buddha with you from these books, where today we're in chapter 21, going further from there. And what I do is I invite a student either here at the temple or anybody that's on Zoom, that you can volunteer to read these chapters. So these chapters, you can see this one is barely a half a page. So once a student reads the chapter, then I will share some teachings on that for maybe 5 minutes or so, depending on what the chapter is. And then I'll open up to any questions that you guys have. Whether you're here at the temple or you're joining us online, you can ask questions. If you'd like to volunteer to read and you're here at the temple, or if you have questions at any point, we have microphones in the white bowl there in the center of the room. All you need to do is get a microphone, press the gray button. You're going to see the lights come on, and you hold that up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online. And if you didn't speak here with a microphone, the people online wouldn't be able to actually hear you. So it's important to have a microphone when you're speaking. And then you can just keep these microphones with you, because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share the microphone wherever you are. So you can take these back to your seat. And then for those of you guys in Zoom, if you'd like to volunteer to read, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and then you'll be able to read, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple. They'll be able to hear you online as well. And then if you guys have any questions, the same thing. If you guys could use the microphones here, and then those of you guys online, if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put that into the comment section. I'll be able to see that. And if you're in Zoom, you can also electronically raise your hand with questions, unmute your microphone, and we'll be able to hear you here, and they'll be able to hear you online. So would anybody like to volunteer to read this first chapter, chapter 21? Yeah, Drew, go for it, sir.
Breathing mindfulness meditation. Well established, annoying thoughts and impulses don't exist. Remain focused, monks, on the foulness in the body. Have mindfulness of the in and out breathing well established in front of you. Remain focused on the inconsistency of all untruths. For one who remains focused on the foulness of the body, the obsession with passion for the property of beauty is abandoned. For one who has mindfulness of in and out breathing well established in front of oneself, annoying thoughts and impulses don't exist. For one who remains focused on the inconsistency of all untruths, ignorance is abandoned, clear wisdom arises. Focused on foulness in the body, mindful of in and out breathing, seeing the stilling of all untruths, dedicated always. He is a monk who's seeing clearly. From that, he is there liberated. A master of direct knowledge, at peace, he is a wise one gone beyond bondage.
Okay, thank you, sir. So what a Buddha is an individual who's gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They've gotten to this enlightened mental state where their mind's peaceful and joyful permanently. So they no longer experience any of those discontent feelings, and they experience all those other benefits that I mentioned. And in order to be an actual Buddha, an individual would need to have figured this out on their own without the help of any teachers or any guides. Then they would dedicate the rest of their life to sharing those independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people would be getting to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they would preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people would get to enlightenment after their death. So what the Buddha did is he figured out how to get to this enlightened mental state, and he spent the rest of his life helping other people understand how to accomplish that same thing. So what you're reading here is you're reading words of the Buddha of things that he taught during his lifetime. He's just explaining what it takes to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. And then as a student, you're not interested in believing any of these teachings because belief doesn't lead to your enlightenment. When you're believing something, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody either convinced you to believe it or you convinced yourself to believe it. So what you need to be able to do in order to get to enlightenment is you need to cultivate wisdom. You need to be able to know the truth about the natural laws and how the world functions. When your mind's experiencing stress and anxiety and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, this is the mind struggling and having difficulties in the world because you're essentially living in a world that you don't understand. You're experiencing these certain struggles and difficulties. You may think that that anger and frustration is coming from somebody else and somebody else is causing you to be angry or frustrated. But what you can see through the teachings of the Buddha in a way that you can learn, examine, and investigate, you can reflect on it to independently verify it, and you can practice to see yourself, is that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And when you come to this understanding, then you can actually fix it. Because as long as you blame other people for the feelings that you experience, you'll never be able to fix what is that's going on within your own mind. So what the Buddha is doing here is he's explaining certain aspects of the path to enlightenment for his students to be able to understand. And they would have already studied certain teachings by the time they get here. This is why we're in volume 7, chapter 21, that there's all kinds of other teachings that someone would have typically studied. So if this is your first time here or your first time studying the teachings of the Buddha, no worries. This isn't typically where somebody will start. You'll learn plenty today as part of our class, but just understand that this isn't typically where someone starts. In fact, today at 1 p.m., I have an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha course that you guys are welcome to take. It's only a 3-hour course where if you're just starting out on the path, this is an excellent opportunity for you to be able to get started from the very beginning. So I'm going to be starting that today at 1 o'clock, and then it goes until 4. So you guys are welcome to come. There's no cost for anything that we do here, whether it's the resources that we share, the courses or the classes or the retreats. You guys are welcome to just come, and anybody who you might bump into between now and then, they're welcome to come as well. That's a great place to start. But you'll surely learn something here today, because what the Buddha is teaching you is various aspects of the path to enlightenment. This first part, he says, remain focused, monks, on foulness in the body, having mindfulness of the in and out breathing well established in front of you. Remain focused on the inconsistency of all untruths. So he's talking about 3 different things here. This first one, he's talking about the foulness of the body. That's what he's talking about here. You might be interested to know, like, well, why would he teach something like that? Why would he teach to be focused on the foulness of the body? Isn't that kind of pessimistic to be thinking about the pus and the blood and the urine and the feces and the all this other stuff stuff, right? We could go on and on and on. The mucus, the saliva. Why would he teach something like that? Well, the reason why he's teaching this is because the primary thing that's causing your mind to experience anger and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, annoyment and agitation, is that the mind has what's called sensual desire. What sensual desire is where the mind is longing and yearning, wanting things to be permanently agreeable. You experience contact through your eyes, through your ears, through your nose, through your tongue, through the body, and then there's certain thoughts and ideas that go through your mind. And the mind craves permanently agreeable contact. And when you get that contact that is agreeable to you, you get happy and excited or enthusiastic, or, you get really thrilled about what it is that you're experiencing. But then when you have contact through any of these senses that is disagreeable to you, you get frustrated, you get agitated or annoyed. So this is where you can see that it's your own mind that's causing these discontent feelings. Think about if you're at a stoplight in a car and someone pulls up to you with some really great music that you particularly like, and you're like, wow, that's my jam. All right, let's go. Come on, party, party. You're dancing in your seat, bopping around, having a good old time because this sound that's coming through your ear is agreeable to you. And because of your sensual desire, you're craving your desire, you find it to be agreeable, and now you get so happy and excited. But now you pull up to the next traffic light, and somebody else pulls up with some other kind of music. And because of your sensual desire, you find this music to be disagreeable. You don't like the sound of it. And now you get frustrated because you're having contact through the ears that is disagreeable to you. And this is the same thing that's happening with every single one of your sense bases. Think about your eyes. If you see something that you consider to be agreeable, like maybe there's children walking down the street holding the hand of their parents, and you're like, oh, that's so warm, that's so loving, look at that. The child is holding their parent's hand, oh, that's so beautiful. And you get so happy from that. But now you go to the street, you turn the corner and you walk down the next street and you see a parent slap their child across their face, right? We're not talking about what's wise or unwise here. We're just talking about what's causing the mind to be frustrated or agitated. It's because now you just saw something that is disagreeable to you that came through your eyes. And because of the sensual desire in the mind, you'll now become frustrated or agitated. Or say you're walking down the street and you pass by a flower shop and you smell a certain odor, and this odor is agreeable to you, and you're like, wow, that's such a great smell, those flowers smell great, and you're so happy from the flowers. But now you walk a few more steps and you smell the sewer, and now you get frustrated or agitated. This is where you can see that it's not other people that are causing you to be frustrated, because there wasn't even anybody involved. It was just you walking down the street, and you experienced contact that you saw as agreeable or disagreeable. So when you have this sensual desire in the mind, you're going to have what's called favoring and opposing, or seeing things as agreeable and disagreeable. And now you're going to keep making yourself frustrated and agitated over and over and over again because of what the mind's doing based on its sensual desire. So one of the things that we have sensual desire about is this physical body. We'll look at other people, we'll find them to be physically attractive, and now we might be interested in having sexual contact with this person because you're looking for those pleasant feelings of having that intimacy and that closeness and taking the mind to that point where maybe even there's an orgasm or something like this. So the Buddha teaches to develop this understanding of the foulness of the body to take away some of that sensual desire in the mind, where the mind's longing, yearning, wanting things to be permanently pleasing. So having this developed in the mind, you can actually get to the point where you don't have this sensual desire any longer. So this is just one aspect of the teachings of the Buddha. You'll know that someone is beautiful, or you'll see someone as being handsome when you're enlightened, but your mind won't be longing, yearning. Where before, when you were in the unenlightened state, you see someone handsome or beautiful, you might be like, oh, wow, I'd really like to get with that person, right? But as you get to enlightenment and you no longer have that in the mind, you'll still know they're beautiful or that they're handsome, but you won't have that longing, yearning externally, thinking that if I can just get this thing, everything will be perfect in my life. right? That might be what your mind is experiencing, where you're longing, yearning, and like, wow, if I can just get more money, everything in my life will be better. If I can just get that job, everything will be perfect. If I can just live in that place, everything will be perfect. If I can just get that boyfriend or girlfriend, everything will be perfect in my life. So your mind will just long and yearn and chase after all these different things as long as there's sensual desire in the mind. So when you abandon that from the mind, you can get to the point where you're just always peaceful, you're always joyful. If you're eating a particular food right now, you might find that agreeable, but if you eat a different type of food, you might be frustrated or agitated. You can get to the point where when you're eating food, you just understand it's something to nourish the body. It's not anything to please the tongue. It's a matter of knowing that, wow, this food tastes really nice, but it's not permanent, that you're going to eventually taste a flavor that is not tasting so nice. And you don't have to be angry about that. You don't have to be dissatisfied about that. You can just understand like, okay, this is a different flavor than I'm used to, but I can still eat it because it's nourishing the body. So getting to this point where you understand the foulness of the body will help you to be able to accomplish that. Then he's talking here about developing mindfulness through observing the in and out breath. That will help you to eliminate the annoying thoughts and impulses so that they don't exist in the mind. The way that this happens is that meditation we just did, the breathing mindfulness meditation, where you're focused on the breath and the mind moves off the breath. You're cutting that off and letting it go and coming back to the breath. What you're training your mind to do is let go. Because with that sensual desire that I was just talking about, that's the mind craving and desiring. It's holding on. It's wanting things to be permanently pleasing. And again, if it gets what it wants, it gets happy. And if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets angry or sad or frustrated or some other discontent feeling. So what you need to be able to do is train your mind to let go, where you're not holding on and trying to seek satisfaction externally. So it's this breathing mindfulness meditation that's going to help you to do that, because you need to have mindfulness or awareness of mind. So when you're focused on the breath and the mind moves off the breath, that's developing your mindfulness or your awareness of mind. So you're aware of what's going on in your own mind, not only in meditation, but in your day-to-day life too. You're going to need to be aware of what's going on in your own mind. And then when you're cutting off and letting go, when your mind's moved off the breath and you're bringing it back, this is disciplining your mind so that you can get focus and concentration and clarity, training your mind to let go. So now, say you're walking in the mall and you see that pair of shoes in the window and you're like, oh my goodness, I just want to get those shoes on my feet so bad. They're going to look so great. My friends are going to look at me. My coworkers are going to look at me and they're just going to know that I'm so accomplished and successful. I just can't wait to get those shoes on my feet. And you get so excited about those shoes. Well, if you can see that your mind's longing, yearning for them, you can actually cut it off. So if you have mindfulness or awareness of mind that your mind's longing, yearning, you can cut that off and let it go and be like, no. I got 30 pairs of shoes at home. I don't need one more pair of shoes. I don't have 30 pairs anymore, but I used to, right? So I used to have all these different shoes. So maybe there's something else in your mind. Maybe you're like, oh, I know what I need. I need more money. And you see your mind chasing and longing, yearning after that, forming your inner feelings on where your bank account is. Whereas if your bank account's up here, you're happy. And if it goes down here, you're sad or frustrated. This is because of the central desire. So the breathing mindfulness meditation is helping you to develop that mindfulness so you can be aware when your mind is pulling towards things or it's longing, yearning, and you can cut it off and let it go. And this is where you can get rid of these annoying thoughts and these impulses. The impulses is the craving. Like, oh, I know what I need. I need to go get this. And the mind just wants to run and jump and chase, right? And now if you get it, you're happy. And if you don't get it, you're annoyed and you're frustrated. So if you're practicing breathing mindfulness meditation, among other things that the Buddha taught, you'll be able to eliminate these annoying thoughts and these impulses where you're never really quite content with what you're currently doing. The mind is just always longing, yearning for something else. It's never pleased with where it's at. It always wants to be somewhere different. Okay? Then the Buddha talks about remaining focused on inconsistency of all untruths. This is part of the path. This isn't really necessarily part of the meditation. This line right here is why it's in this particular book. But one of the things that you're doing, the main thing you're doing on the path to enlightenment, is you're looking to get to wisdom. If you can get to wisdom about the natural laws and how this mind functions, if you can focus on the inconsistency of untruths, then you can eliminate what's referred to as ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, so that you can get to this clear wisdom where you clearly understand how this mind functions and you clearly understand the world around you. Because right now you're probably going through the world not fully understanding the things that you encounter. Maybe you watch the news and you're like, I just don't understand why those people keep doing that. I just don't understand. Or maybe you hear something from one of your family members. I just don't understand why they keep doing that, Mom. I really don't understand, right? Or maybe you think that to yourself. Like, I just don't understand. If you're telling yourself these kinds of things, that's because there's certain things about the world that you don't understand. There's a lack of wisdom. By the time you get to enlightenment and you can be able to cultivate the wisdom of the natural laws, you'll understand everything about how the world's functioning. You won't have this ignorance or unknowing of true reality. You'll have clear wisdom. And this is where the mind can be steady and stable, that you're not always shaken up. Because right now, if certain things are happening in the world that you disagree with, your mind's probably shaken up to a certain degree where there's frustration or agitation or stress or anxiety. But what the Buddha is teaching you is how to get rid of all that. And in order to get rid of it, you need to arise wisdom, where you can clearly see how this mind functions, and now you can train it to function more optimally and purify it through training of the mind. So then the Buddha, the way he's typically teaching is, once he teaches you something, he will tell you what he's going to teach you. He will teach it to you, and then he's going to tell you what he actually taught you. So that's what he did up here. He said, this is what I'm going to teach you, right? And then he taught it to you in these 3 lines, and then he told you what he taught you. This is very common. You'll see the Buddha do this. Nowadays, there's people, without necessarily knowing the Buddha taught this way, they'll say this is the way you should present material. When you go into a business setting, they say, okay, teach the people what you're going to teach them, teach it to them, and then tell them what you told them, right? So the Buddha's been doing that for 2,500 years. So that's what the Buddha's saying here, is that, okay, now if you're dedicated, you can get to this point where you have clearly seen. And then, having clearly seen the truth and cultivated wisdom, you'll experience liberation. What liberation is, where your mind is free. Right? When you're angry and you're sad and you're stressed and you're having anxiety, your mind's not free. It's bound up, right? But you can get to this point where there's liberation in the mind, where it's peaceful and joyful. And then he talks about this master of direct knowledge and experience. What that means is that the way that you cultivate wisdom is when you learn the Buddha's teachings, you contrast that to your day-to-day experiences and what you experience on a day-to-day life. And that's where you, through your own direct experience, can cultivate wisdom. So when I was giving you guys those examples about the flower shop in the sewer, or listening to music, hearing the music that is agreeable to you or disagreeable to you, through your own direct experience, you can think about it and you're like, whoa, that is exactly what my mind is doing. Right? So I understand how your mind functions because I've studied and I understand and I can see and I know how your mind functions based on the natural laws. So I can give you example after example of how you experience these frustrated feelings and these annoyed feelings. So through your own direct experience, you can experience the arising of wisdom, because when a teacher is explaining to you what's happening through your mind, you can confirm it through your own direct experience, through your inner reflection. And then, having mastered that direct experience and cultivated wisdom, you will be at peace. Because more and more, as you cultivate wisdom about the natural laws, you can cultivate this peacefulness in the mind. He is wise, one gone beyond bondage, right? Because the mind is bound up when it's stressed or annoyed or disappointed or frustrated or any of these other discontent feelings. Your mind's all bound up. It's not free. So by learning and practicing in this way, it helps the mind get to that freedom. There's a core central teaching that the Buddha shares. It's called the Eightfold Path. That's really what you need to learn to get started. That's what's going to help you and give you the full guidance of how to actually get to enlightenment. This is a teaching that kind of plugs into that, because all of his other teachings plug into that core central teaching. So that's why, starting with the first book, you'll be able to learn with the original words of the Buddha what the Eightfold Path is, because it's so important that you learn with the original words of the Buddha. There's lots of resources out there that will claim that what they're sharing with you are the teachings of the Buddha. But what you'll find is is there's a lot of misunderstandings in these teachings. So it's important that you get to reliable translations of the original words of the Buddha. And that's what these book series provides. And that's what we're studying here, are these translations. So does anybody have questions about this particular chapter? Yeah, Liz, you got a question? Remember, those of you guys online, you can use Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, the comment section, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, David. So I'm looking in particular at the part that says, for one who remains focused on the inconsistency of all untruths, ignorance, unknowing of true reality, abandoned clear wisdom arises. When I am in my meditation practice, which I've only been doing very consistently for like 2 months, so I'm still a novice, I recognize. But a lot of times when I'm trying to do either breathing mindfulness or loving kindness, clarity will come to what I think is clarity will come to me in these moments, and it's a kind of like strength and an ability to let go. Are those things too I should also let go of and cut off, though, in that time, because that's just a momentary clarity and I need to put that aside and reflect on it later. So that's not something I should be ruminating on in that moment. That the purpose is to divest of all things, let it arise, and what sticks later, but not in that moment still, even though if it seems like a strengthening positive, to still let that go.
Exactly. And the reason why is because in meditation, you're training your mind to eliminate certain unwholesome qualities and cultivate certain wholesome qualities. It's like a training period. That's like you're in the gym, right? You're pumping iron, and now there's like a great show that comes on the TV. You ignore that, right? Even though it's the greatest documentary that's ever been created and you've been interested to watch it your whole life, you're focusing on lifting weights. So get your weights lifted. And then if you'd like to see the documentary, you go look at it afterwards when you're at home, right? So when you're doing the meditation, you're training your mind to eliminate those unwholesome qualities and cultivate the wholesome qualities. So anything and everything that comes up, you're cutting off and letting go. But then you have those qualities to use later. So this part here, what I'll point out is this is the Buddha talking about not something that you do in meditation. He's just saying this is something that's part of the path to enlightenment. This chapter has more than just about meditation. This part right here is the reason why it's in this particular book, because he's talking about how breathing mindfulness meditation leads to the elimination of annoying thoughts and impulses. But then there's also another aspect of your practice is that you're going to need to get to the truth, because what we tend to do in the unenlightened state is we tend to cling to our perceptions. A perception is like your view and opinion about the world, and it's not necessarily true. Right? You might be walking down the street, you might see somebody looking at you in a certain way, and right away your mind thinks, oh, they're going to do me harm. They want to cause harm to me. Well, that's your perception. You don't know that to be true. It's just a perception that your mind's clinging to. So in order to get to enlightenment, you need to be able to make wise decisions and always working based on the truth. So if you cling to a perception, for example, you can't get to that truth. So every single aspect of your life, you're always looking for the truth. Like, what is the truth here? And you need to be able to do that through your reflection, through asking questions, through observing through your own direct experience. But if any of those truths start rising up during meditation, yeah, you just cut it off and let it go, because you're training your mind at that point in meditation. But this is something that you're doing outside of meditation, is this cultivation of wisdom. The meditation is going to ultimately help you to be able to do that, because then you'll be able to cut those things off. Whereas if like a perception arose in your day-to-day life and you didn't understand what perceptions were and that that's what your mind was doing, and you didn't realize that it was clinging and holding on, you wouldn't know to cut that off. Be like, no. That person hasn't said anything to me. They haven't done anything to me. This is my own perception. This is my own judgment. I'm not interested in allowing the mind to do that. I am going to cut that off. So by doing the breathing mindfulness meditation, you'll be able to more easily get to the truth, because wherever you see something like a perception arise, you can cut it off and let it go. But you wouldn't be able to do that if you weren't training the mind and disciplining it through meditation.
Thank you. I have one more follow-up question to that, and perhaps this is like a bit clingy. But I wonder, when I have these, perceptions that arise in meditation that I feel like are putting me on a path towards strength, independence, and all of these things, in order to move forward on those, I in certain other philosophies, or even in like Buddhist aspects of recovery, refuge recovery, they have like workbooks and things like this, where there's steps about what to do and what to do with these manifestations of perception, and how to determine which can best help you. Do you recommend going to something like that? Because I find that I have like 8,000 notebooks of things, but I have trouble then with following through, like having the best intuition with which to follow through on.
Yeah, you could do this. Like, you could write down the things that your mind comes up with, because any thoughts that you have, you can look at it, not in meditation, but you can look at it afterwards and determine whether it would be wise for you to go forward with this particular thing or not. And if you need to write it down in order to be able to remember it and kind of think about it and solidify whether that's something you would like to do, you're welcome to do those kinds of things. The Buddha didn't have that ability during his lifetime. There was no such thing as journaling or taking notes, because the language that he spoke was an oral tradition. They didn't have the technology to write things down. So you don't have to write things down in order to get to enlightenment. But now that we have that ability, there's no harm in writing things down so that you can then remember them later and potentially take action on them if you like.
I just have one more, sorry. I guess what I'm asking is, I have written things down. I have like stacks and stacks and stacks of all these things, but I guess I'm looking for a way to cut through all of the clutter consciously when I'm not in meditation. Guidance on that piece, what to do with all of these infinite ideas and how to channel and focus. Are there, maybe we can talk later about specific resources. I think I need something a bit more structured, because my mind will seek infinite possibility, but the decision is a challenge.
Yeah, this is where you're going to need to look at the things that your mind's coming up with and decide what are you interested in putting action behind. I don't know of any way to distill that and point you to what would be the one thing that would be wise for you to go forward with. That's where your wisdom has to kick in, and you have to look at these 20 different ideas that you have and figure out what's the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you would like to put effort behind today in order to move that forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions. All right, I'm not seeing anything anywhere, so let's go to the next one. Is there someone who would like to read this next one? By the way, what you guys have here, let me come back up. Oops, did I pass it? Yeah. What you have here is you have the words of the Buddha in each one of these chapters. You've got a reference that takes you back to the original source teachings in those 45 volumes of books. So if you'd like to see what the Buddha was talking about before this or after this, or you'd like to just confirm your confidence that David is presenting to you the original words of the Buddha, you can use this reference to go back to the original books. And then you've got words from me that are going to be able to help you to be able to understand what the Buddha is teaching you, how to implement that in your day-to-day life. What the Buddha is teaching is very clear, very concise, and very precise. You don't need anyone to interpret his words for you. You're never interpreting the words of the Buddha. You're learning them, examining them, investigating them, reflecting on them to independently verify them and practice them. But it helps to have a dedicated practitioner and teacher who understands the totality of the teachings and can show you how this one particular teaching relates to 2 or 3 other teachings. That's what I'm doing here, is that particular chapter, if you would have just read it on your own and you didn't have an understanding of the totality of the teachings of the Buddha, you might be a little bit confused. But not because the Buddha is teaching anything that's confusing, but just because of your lack of wisdom of his full teachings, you need somebody to help guide you through, kind of like a tour guide. I'm like a tour guide, pointing out things to you and helping you guys to learn and understand. So that's what this is doing here, is the words that I'm sharing is kind of pointing you in the direction of understanding how to implement this in your day-to-day life and actually get real results out of that particular teaching. So each one of these chapters have words from me to be able to help you. So this is chapter 22. Would someone like to read this one? Yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
Mindfulness meditation, the Tathagata's dwelling. Monks, if wanderers of other communities ask you, in what dwelling, friends, did the perfectly enlightened one generally dwell during the rain's retreat? Being asked thus, you should answer those wanderers thus. During the rain's residence, friends, the perfectly enlightened one generally resided in the concentration by mindfulness of breathing. breathing mindfulness meditation. Here, monks, mindful I breathe in, mindful I breathe out. When breathing in long, I know I breathe in long. When breathing out long, I know I breathe out long. When breathing in short, I know I breathe in short. When breathing out short, I know I breathe out short. I know, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. I know, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. I know, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe in. I know, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe out. I know, experiencing joy, I will breathe in. I know, experiencing joy, I will breathe out. I know, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe in. I know, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe out. I know, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe in. I know, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe out. I know, calming the mental activity, I will breathe in. I know, calming the mental activity, I will breathe out. I know, experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. I know, experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. I know, gladdening the mind, I will breathe in. I know, gladdening the mind, I will breathe out. I know, concentrating the mind, I will breathe in. I know, concentrating the mind, I will breathe out. I know, liberating the mind, I will breathe in. I know, liberating the mind, I will breathe out. I know, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe in. I know, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe out. I know, reflecting on fading away, I will breathe in. I know, reflecting on fading away, I will breathe out. I know, reflecting on elimination, I will breathe in. I know, reflecting on elimination, I will breathe out. I know, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in. I know, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. If anyone, monks, speaking rightly, could say of anything, it is a noble dwelling, an excellent dwelling, the Tathagata's dwelling. It is of concentration by mindfulness of breathing that one could rightly say this. Monks, those monks who are trainees, who have not attained their mind's ideal, who dwell aspiring for the unsurpassed security from bondage, enlightenment. For them, concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, leads to the destruction of the taints. Those monks who are arahants, whose taints are destroyed, who have lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached their own goal, completely destroyed the fetters of existence, those completely liberated through final knowledge, wisdom. For the concentration of mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, leads to a peaceful dwelling in this very life, into mindfulness and clear comprehension. If anyone, monks, speaking rightly, could say of anything, it is a noble dwelling, an excellent dwelling. The Tathagata's dwelling is of concentration by mindfulness of breathing, that one could rightly say this.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So first, what a Tathagata is an actual Buddha. This word Tathagata is how the Buddha would refer to himself. He very rarely referred to himself as the Buddha, because a Buddha doesn't need to walk around and constantly telling people that they are an actual Buddha. So the Buddha referred to himself as the Tathagata. The word Tathagata means the one who speaks the truth, or the one who's discovered the truth, or the one who shares the truth, because an individual who's a Buddha has discovered the truth about the natural laws, and then they're sharing that with others to be able to help them awaken. So here, the Tathagata's dwelling is, where does the Buddha reside during these rain retreats? That during the rainy season, the Buddha would teach his students to stay inside the temple. Because if you can imagine, during the lifetime of a Buddha, there'd just be thousands and thousands of people studying with this person. And then during the rainy period, where this earth was nice and soft, if they were traveling throughout the countryside, they would damage people's crops, because nowadays we have well-defined roads and sidewalks and things like that, but during that lifetime they didn't. So when they would travel from town to town, they would just walk through people's land, and if you were traveling during the rainy season, there would be lots of damage potentially to the crops, and then this is going to affect people not to have food. So he would teach his ordained practitioners to stay inside the temple for 3 months out of the year during the rainy season. And this is actually still in place today, that if you're around a Buddhist country during the rainy season, there's a 3-month period where the ordained practitioners will stay in the temple. It's pretty much from about July until about October is kind of like where it usually is happening, but it really depends because it's on the lunar schedule. but there's this 3-month period where everybody kind of stays in the temple and learns and grows and develops. So the Buddha is saying, hey, if anybody should ask you, meaning those students from other communities, because you might think during the lifetime of the Buddha that he was the only teacher who was teaching, but in reality there was other teachers who were teaching, and it was claiming that their teachings led to enlightenment. So there would be people who were learning from those other teachers, and then the students of the Buddha would come together with those students of other teachers, and they would ask those the Buddha's students questions. And the Buddha is saying, hey, suppose those students of other communities would ask you, where do I reside during the rainy season? Well, what he's saying is I reside in breathing mindfulness meditation. That's what I do for those 3 months, is I spend time meditating. And that's what he's teaching to be able to do. And then he goes through his guidance on breathing mindfulness meditation. This is how he would guide his students in breathing mindfulness meditation. This is a step-by-step instruction of what you would do during the meditation. And then I've consolidated that in the way that I guide you guys this morning. But this is kind of the long form of that. It's kind of like when you learned how to brush your teeth as a child. Your parents gave you step-by-step instructions of how to brush your teeth, but now you don't think about that anymore. You just put the toothpaste on, shove it in your mouth, and you swish it around, and next thing you know, your teeth are brushed, right? But when you were young, when you were like 3 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old, you had to think about every little step of brushing your teeth in order to figure out how to do this properly. And then once you figured it out, you don't have to think about it anymore. So the Buddha here is giving you the step-by-step, and there's other times where I've actually walked through this to help students to be able to understand every single aspect of this. But one of the things I'm going to focus on here is this part right here, is reflecting on impermanence. This is the very first teaching, essentially, of the Buddha that you need to be able to understand in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment. What I was talking about earlier with the central desire, where the mind is craving that permanently agreeable contact, wanting things to be permanently agreeable, one of the reasons why the mind is doing that is because it doesn't understand the universal truth of impermanence, that things are constantly changing in the world around you. If your mind is craving permanence, which every unenlightened mind is to a certain degree, then the mind's not understanding impermanence, that things are constantly changing. So if you crave for things to be permanent, and you don't realize you live in an impermanent world, you'll constantly crave that. So for example, when grandma and grandpa die and you're having sorrow and grief and despair, this is not because of your love for grandma and grandpa. This is because the mind's craving them to be permanent. As long as they are alive, the mind was getting what you wanted and you were happy. But then when the mind doesn't get what it wants, which is that permanence and grandma and grandpa to be alive, now the mind struggles during that period of time. It doesn't realize that because grandma and grandpa were born, they had to die. There was no way around that. That because they were born, they had to die because they are impermanent, just like every single one of us. We all are going to have to die. There's no way around that. Because we were born, we have to die. We are impermanent. So this is one of the teachings that you need to learn on your journey to enlightenment, is the universal truth of impermanence, is explaining to you that everything around you is constantly changing. This is impermanence. And you can independently verify it. So you don't believe me, is you can look around the world and see for yourself that things are constantly changing. You won't be able to find anything in this material world that is permanent. So you're going to need to be able to deeply reflect on that and be able to see the truth that you live in an impermanent world. So then when you see a scratch on your car, your brand new car, you don't get frustrated and agitated and annoyed. It's kind of like, yeah, of course, because of impermanence, this car is going to get scratched. It's only a matter of time, right? But if we crave permanence and we're trying to keep that car looking permanently beautiful, when it gets that scratch, you'll be frustrated or annoyed. But when you see that scratch, you're like, oh, okay, I understand impermanence. This car is impermanent. So maybe I can get it buffed out. Maybe I can take it to the insurance company and they'll fix it for me. Or maybe, you know what, it's not even that big of a deal. I'm just not even going to worry. I'm not even going to think about it. No big deal that this particular scratch is on there, right? So you can get to the point where you understand the world that you live in is impermanent. So you don't keep going around craving permanence. So this is one of the things that you learn as you're developing on the path. And then the Buddha, once again, he said, he told you what he was going to tell you. Then he taught it to you. Then he told you what he actually taught you. But then he goes in here and he says, those monks who are trainees, basically people who are just starting out on the path to enlightenment, who have not attained their mind's ideal, meaning gotten to enlightenment where the mind's fully purified, who dwell aspiring for the unsurpassed security from bondage, meaning that you're aspiring to get to enlightenment, you would like to get to this peace and joy. For them, concentration by mindfulness of breathing, this meditation that you just practiced, when developed and cultivated, leads to the destruction of the taints. What the taints are those pollutions of mind that I mentioned briefly at the beginning of class. There's 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered. They're referred to as the taints or the defilements. More specifically, they're referred to as the 10 fetters. These are 10 individual things that are in the mind that the Buddha discovered, and then he figured out the tools and the techniques of how to eliminate them. They're referred to as fetters because during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were a criminal and they were trying to keep you confined to a certain area, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. There was a shackle and a chain and a ball, and they would keep you kind of in a field, and now you would just basically stay in that area, and that's where they would keep you confined. Where today we have jail cells, prison cells, things like this. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. So when he discovered these pollutions in the mind, he referred to them as fetters because it's keeping you trapped in this unenlightened state. It's keeping you confined. That's why he calls it bondage, because you're bound up, right? So for anyone who cultivates this breathing mindfulness meditation, he's saying it leads to the destruction of these pollutions of the mind. You would need more details, more information to be able to fully eliminate these pollutions. It's not just meditation that's going to do that for you, but meditation is one of the things that you need. If you weren't doing breathing mindfulness meditation, you would have no opportunity to actually eliminate the taints or the defilements or these 10 fetters. Monks, those monks who are arahants. An arahant is an enlightened being. That's how they would refer to an enlightened being during his lifetime, whose taints are destroyed, meaning they've eliminated the 10 pollutions, who have lived the holy life, so they've lived this pure life, done what had to be done, so they've done the work to train their mind, laid down the burden. The burden is craving, desire, attachment. Having craving in your mind, it's a burden to carry around, right? Like think about all the money that you've spent chasing after your cravings, desires, attachments. Think about how heavy of a load that is on your shoulders. You go out in the day and you chase after your cravings, desires, attachments. And if you get things your way, you'll come home and you'll be like, wow, this was a good day. This was a wonderful day. But if you go out into the world with all that craving on your shoulders and things aren't happening the way you want, you'll come home and be like, oh, this was a horrible day. I am so exhausted. Oh, I just want to sit here on the couch and do nothing, because you've been carrying around that burden. That's why you get exhausted by the end of your day if you're carrying around that burden of craving, desire, attachment. By the time you lay down this burden, because that's what the Buddha is talking about here, laying down this burden, by the time you lay down craving, desire, attachment, you're not going to get exhausted at the end of your day. An enlightened being doesn't get exhausted. Their mind is uplifted and bright and radiant all day long. Doesn't matter what they're doing throughout their day, they will continue to have that peace and that joy, that radiance, that brightness, that cheerfulness, that gladness in the mind. Because they're not carrying around a burden. The burden is that if I get what I want, I'm happy. And if I don't get what I want, I'm angry and I'm sad and I'm frustrated. That's a real burden to carry around. So this breathing mindfulness meditation is going to allow you to lay down that burden of craving, desire, attachment, where you can reach your goal of getting to enlightenment, where the mind is peaceful and joyful. Completely destroyed the fetters of existence. That's those 10 fetters. Those completely liberated through final knowledge, meaning they fully understand the path to enlightenment. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll fully understand the entire path. We call that final knowledge. For them, concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, leads to a peaceful dwelling in this very life into mindfulness and clear comprehension. So what he's saying is these enlightened beings, the people who have gotten to enlightenment, breathing mindfulness meditation is something that they practice that has led them to accomplishing these particular goals. Right? So then the Buddha says, if anyone among speaking rightly could say anything, It is a noble dwelling, an excellent dwelling. The Tathagata's dwelling is of concentration by mindfulness of breathing. That's where he actually dwells during this rainy season, right? And other times too. He's not just meditating during rainy season, but he's kind of reminding people like, hey, during this rainy season, this is an ideal time for you to meditate because you're in the temple, you're not going anywhere, you're in the rains retreat. Focus on meditation. This is the way the Buddha teaches, right? He doesn't he doesn't force you. He doesn't push you. He doesn't pressure you. He doesn't put his expectations on you. He's just saying, hey, if you would like to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state that I've gotten to, well, it's breathing mindfulness meditation that's led to it. Here's how to do it. And then whether someone chooses to do it or not, it's up to them. If they would like to see the truth, that your mind has the potential to get to this peace and joy, the Buddha is saying, hey, this is how I did it. Breathing mindfulness meditation is one of the tools out of all the others that he needed in order to get to enlightenment. So you guys have any questions on this chapter? Steve? Yep.
Thank you, David. Just on the section on reflecting.
Mm-hmm. The one that I was talking about?
Yes.
Down here? Okay.
So if I read that, and the topic is breathing mindfulness meditation, that can give me the impression that during my breathing mindfulness meditation, I'm going to consciously reflect on impermanence. I'm going to consciously reflect on fading away. And so on. But that's not my understanding of what I should be doing. Is it? Yeah. Is it like a breathing mindfulness 2.0 later? Or
This is what you're doing when you're first getting started. When you're first getting started in your meditation, the first few weeks, first few months, and you're having thoughts that are arising in your mind, or you're having other things, feelings or whatever, you need to remind yourself, these are impermanent. These thoughts, these ideas, they're impermanent. That's the first one. You need to understand that they are going to fade away, right? They're not going to stay in the mind permanently, that you would like to eliminate this from the mind and you would like to let them go. So you would like to remind yourself of that early on, but then after you've done that, now your practice just becomes focus on the breath. And anytime you see a thought come up, you cut it off and let it go and move it out of the mind. So you don't have to think about these every single time. You just need to know it well enough that you understand what to do during your meditation. So now just focus on the breath, and then anything that comes up, cut it off and let it go. So you don't have to think about this in each individual time, but he's actually explaining to you what you're doing in your meditation, that you're cutting off and letting go, because these things are impermanent, and you're training your mind to let go and eliminate this from the mind.
Thank you. Got it. So this is just describing the framework of what happens when things come up,
yes,
rather than intellectually saying, I'm going to intellectually reflect on impermanence. And
exactly. Because if you actually thought about each one of these things every time during your meditation, your mind's actually not letting go because it's still thinking about something. So he's giving you the instructions and why you need to be doing this, and then you just do it. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, maybe we'll cover one more. Let's see what this next one is, and then we'll just kind of end class there. Let's see. Yeah, let's read this one. Let's see. Is it a... Yeah, this one's just a page and a little bit. Would someone like to read this one? Steve? Yeah, go ahead.
Through breathing mindfulness meditation, no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. At Savatthi, now on that occasion, the Venerable was sitting not far from the perfectly enlightened one, with his legs folded crosswise, holding his body straight, having set up mindfulness in front of him. The perfectly enlightened one saw him sitting nearby, with his legs folded crosswise, his body straight, having set up mindfulness in front of him. Having seen him, he addressed the monks thus, "Monks, do you see any shaking or trembling in this monk's body? Venerable Sir, whenever we see that venerable one, whether he is sitting in the midst of the community or sitting alone in private, we never see any shaking or trembling in that venerable one's body. Monks, that monk gains at will, without trouble or difficulty, that concentration through the development and cultivation of which no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. And what concentration is it through the development and cultivation of which no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind? It is, monks, when concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, has been developed and cultivated that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind. And how, monks, is concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation developed and cultivated so that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind? Here, monks, a monk having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and set up mindfulness in front of him. Just mindful, he breathes in, mindful, he breathes out. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body. Repeat as per chapter 1. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I breathe out. It is, monks, when concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, has been developed and cultivated in this way, that no shaking or trembling occurs in the body, and no shaking or trembling occurs in the mind.
Okay, thank you, sir. So if you guys have ever been somewhere before and you're like doing this kind of stuff with your leg, or you're tapping your foot or something like this, that's the shaking of the body. And where that's coming from is the mind, that the mind is overactive, and now the body's going to pop, bouncing its knee. And what the Buddha is saying is, hey, if you train your mind with breathing mindfulness meditation, the body and the mind is not going to shake like that, because you're going to be still, you're going to be calm, the mind's going to be steady and stable, right? But if you haven't trained with breathing mindfulness meditation, you might notice that. And it can be kind of like frustrating. You think that you're kind of like helping yourself by maybe tapping your fingers or tapping a pencil, but just allowing the mind to stay wired like that, where it's just constantly overactive. And what you would like to do is bring it to the middle, where it's calm and it's steady and it's stable. And that's through breathing mindfulness meditation. The Buddha is helping you to be able to see that. This part that Steve read, where it says repeat as in chapter 1, that's essentially what we were just reading, where it's a step-by-step description of how to do breathing mindfulness meditation. So the Buddha is saying, hey, if you would like to get to this point where you're no longer experiencing the shaking of the mind, because when your mind's stress and anxiety and having all those other discontent feelings, your mind's shaken up, and then the body is shaken up because of that, right? If you would like to get to that point, here, this is the way to do it with breathing mindfulness meditation. Notice the Buddha doesn't pressure you. He doesn't force you. He doesn't put his expectations on you. He's just saying, hey, if this is what you would like to achieve, here's the way to do it. Because he knows that he's done it for himself and he's experiencing that same thing. So he's saying, this is the way I did it, is through breathing mindfulness meditation, along with other teachings as well. Here, we're just focused on meditation, but there's other teachings that you would need besides just meditation. So if you aspire to eliminate the shaking and trembling of the mind in the body, it's breathing mindfulness meditation that's going to help you to do that. So you can build up this practice of meditation from 2 or 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more. That's what you'd ultimately like to build up to. But it can take you 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to that. So take your time. You don't have to put pressure on yourself. You're not in competition with anybody. It's your own independent practice, but you can gradually start clearing things out of your life to create more space for this meditation. And you're going to see not only these improvements here, but you're going to see a whole litany of other improvements that we can describe as part of the enlightened mental state, that you can notice that your mind's becoming more and more awake. Because you'll notice in situations where you were once angry and frustrated or irritated or other discontent feelings, your mind, having meditated regularly and trained it with all the other teachings of the Buddha, when you're in those same exact situations and your mind isn't experiencing that anymore, you'll know that it's these teachings that are leading you to that. So it's not like one day you're angry and frustrated and the next day you're magically enlightened. Or it's not like you're doing all this work and then 10 years from now you're going to see some kind of benefit. No, it's like as you're gradually training your mind, you're going to gradually see the improvement to the condition of your mind. So you'll see that as you're gradually training your mind with these teachings, that things are gradually improving for you. And this is how you'll know you're headed in the right direction. So it's not believe, and hope something good happens when you die. It's learning now, investigating and examining the teachings now. It's reflecting now to verify that they're true. And it's practice the teachings now And as you're integrating those teachings like meditation into your life, you're going to see the benefits now in this life. And you'll see them week by week, month by month. You're going to see improvements to the condition of the mind in your life because your relationships are going to be going better. You're going to be able to make decisions better. Your wisdom is going to be really kicking in so you can make wiser and wiser decisions to experience beneficial results in your day-to-day life. So do you guys have any questions on this chapter? Let's see. Let me check online here. Hello to everyone. Nice to see you guys this morning. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just in class by thanking all of you guys. Thank you for reading. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn the teachings of the Buddha. As you guys would like to learn more, you're more than welcome to come here or join us online because I live stream the classes from here. So even as you travel, you can learn. Like I mentioned this afternoon at 1 p.m., we're going to have the introduction to the teachings of the Buddha to be able to help you to get started if you would like to start. I'm going to be kind of teaching you guys some things kind of from a high level of what the teachings of the Buddha are. Then we're going to go into his very first teaching so that you can understand his very first teaching, which is going to help you to understand the problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And remember, all these books and all these classes, courses, and retreats are available at no cost. You can even get personal guidance so that you can sit down with a teacher and be able to help you to understand how to implement these teachings in your day-to-day life. So if you're interested in eliminating the anger and the frustration and all these other discontent feelings and healing your mind from what hurt you, there's help for you to be able to help you to do that. So again, thank you guys for coming, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and have a wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Sawadee krap, sawadee krap, sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.